Freiburger here. It's the 30th year of the Crusher Camaro. We're going to find out how quick it can be at the drag strip in its latest configuration. This is the Crusher Camaro, the car that's been a project for 30 years. You probably remember it when it had the blown big block Chevy in it, looked like a great street machine, or later on, actually most recently, when it had the grump lump on it and it looked like a modified production car from maybe 1974. Well, most recently, I've converted this to look the same way it did when we first finished it at Hot Rod Magazine in 1995. I'm gonna give you the tech specs all along the way. What I'm gonna do in this video though is hunt for an 1150 quarter-mile time with the car. I've run it at Las Vegas and at Pomona, and both times it ran, let's see, 1176, 1175, but there wasn't that good a traction. So I'm gonna make it happen. By the way, look for a video on my channel. I do give the full 30-year history of this car. It's pretty good. I have some very light wrenching to do before I can get out of here. Then I'm driving 2 hours north to drag strip and we'll see what this thing does. First up, let me tell you about the engine in this thing. And it is the same small block that was in it with the tunnel ram, if you remember that version of the car. It's also the engine that was on the very first episode of my Engine Masters TV show. It's a 400 cubic inch small block Chevy. It's from Blueprint Engines. They made the block and the whole bottom end. It's 10.3-to-1, all forged stuff. And the cylinder heads I put on it, they didn't come with the crate motor, but they're still Blueprint engines. They're 220cc heads as cast. The camshaft in it right now is a hydraulic roller. It's a custom from Isky. It's 244 at 50. I think it's 550 lift. It's on a 108-degree lobe separation angle. Now, the last time I reconfigured this thing, I wanted it to look 1995. That explains these valve covers and just the overall look. And I remember at that time, the intake manifold that was hot was the Edelbrock Performer RPM. It is a high-rise dual plane. And then I've got the Holley 1000 CFM double pumper on it. That carburetor is not really 1000 CFM. They're actually like one of the best driving carburetors out of the box that I've messed around with. The headers on the thing are 1 3/4 inch tubes, and I painted them white a long time ago when I wanted the real early 70s look, and that's kind of flaking off. I have never dyno tested this with this cam and this intake manifold and carburetor, but based on past experience with this engine, it's fair to guess that it makes just a little bit more than 500 pound-feet and a little bit more than 500 horsepower. The little bit of wrenching that I'm going to do under the hood here is just changing this rubber fuel line. Last time I was at the track, I did get a talking to about that. Per NHRA safety rules, you're not allowed to have more than 12 inches of rubber in the entire car. So I'm going to just change this to braided line. The cool part about that is I wanted to show you this trick. I found this little Summit Racing fuel filter, and what's neat about it is that it has a -6 female coupler on the end of it. So I'm going to be able to put it right on the end of that fuel line and then make a real simple hose that goes down to the fuel pump. I've measured out my braided line. That's how long I want it to be. I've seen a lot of homegrown methods for cutting this stuff. You can do it with a cutoff wheel. You can do it with a hacksaw. That's a nightmare. What I like to do is the clippers. These are expensive, but to me, worth it. These are Mishimoto, and watch what happens. This piece of tape is actually for measuring and not for anti-fraying, which is what a lot of guys do. So I have that in there, and watch me chop it. Well, I'm done with that braided line. I got the engine running and I got no leaks. One thing about this is theoretically, I guess I'm more abrasion proof, but this is a ground. So if you accidentally touch a hot wire to that, it's bad. And now that I have it running, I realize I've got an exhaust leak over here. So I'm gonna cinch that thing down. Here's my next issue, which is seat belts. You know, these cannot be too old by NHRA specs. I can't remember how many years before they go out of spec, but you can find the date they were manufactured, usually on the lap belt. And I'm looking at this, and it says January, February, March, April, May of 2013. They're 11 years old, and so I'm gonna have to change them. The car's been kept inside, so they're not too bad. You would think, why do I have to change these? But if they're in any kind of sunlight, it can actually degrade the webbing and be bad. So I'm gonna go ahead and change them. I've been lax on that for a long time. I got these new ones here. Here's a safety harness tip. These are the shoulder belts, which obviously go over your shoulders. Now, the way you attach those to the roll bar is critical. You can wrap them around, or you can have these metal tabs where they bolt on. Here's something I've never liked about the way the Crusher Camaro is done, is see how this metal bracket is pointing towards the rear of the car, and then the belt has to fold up over it. That means that if you get into a hardcore crash, this bracket has the potential to bend and loosen your belts. It probably will. So I've never liked that. They need to be pointed forward. However, what's good about this is that the shoulder harnesses have to be retained, because if you just wrap them around the bar, you may have noticed that they can slide. And if they slide, they come off your shoulders, and that's bad. So this retains them. Instead of using this setup, what I'm gonna do is use a belt that is what they call a Y type, so that both shoulder belts are on this one attachment point. And fortunately, the Crusher has a hole drilled right here for that attachment point. So I feel that this is a safety upgrade. I got the belts bolted down, and I'm in the car, and I'm going to adjust everything for the first time, because you don't want to be that guy who shows up at the drag strip and he's in the staging lanes figuring out how his belts work for the very first time. One thing I've noticed about this harness, which is RJS racing equipment, is that the clip, the center buckle, the release, is on the submarine strap, also called a crotch strap. Now, this is actually a fairly good thing because it's forcing me to use the submarine strap. It's understandable why many guys don't want to do that. But what it does is, if you're in a really bad crash straight into the wall, it keeps your body from submarining under the dash. The other thing that it does is, by holding the buckle right here, when you tighten your shoulder belts, it doesn't pull the lap belts up. You ever have that when you end up with your buckle like right here? Well, the submarine belt's gonna keep that from happening. So I'm gonna adjust all this stuff up and make it good before I get to the track. Click that in, click that. Okay. I only have one last thing to do, and it's pretty minor. All right, the last thing's really easy, but I do have tech tips involved in changing my wheels and tires. I still have slicks on it from last time it was at the track. I'm gonna put the street tires on. When I did that before at the track, I used this lug nut right here, and this is the craziest story about lug nuts ever. I don't know what brand these are or where they came from, but we were tightening them down, and we tightened them with a torque wrench and walked away, or maybe it was just a star wrench, and with me not even touching the lug nut, boom, the end of it shot off. It broke in half right there and shot apart. And I had multiples that did that. And when we tightened them too much, they also came apart. They weren't bottoming in the stud or anything, they just came apart. So the lesson is, buy good lug nuts, which I did. These are my Magards. These cost $25 a package. And because they come in packs of 4, you have to buy 3 packs to get 10 lug nuts. So I've got $75 worth of lug nuts, but at least I'm not gonna die. All right, next tech tip. Have you ever seen one of these? This is an Amazon special that is just great. It's a cordless air pump that uses a DeWalt battery. A 20-volt max battery, and they're so cool. You can set the pressure on them and just hook them up and turn them on and walk away, and I've checked it with multiple gauges. They actually nail the air pressure. So convenient with the DeWalt battery. So those are cheap, and I totally recommend them. All right, now I'm gonna change the wheels and tires. The ones I'm putting on are actually reproduction Centerline Convo Pros. These were like the 90s deluxe. These are no longer made by the original Centerline company, and the wheel's just a little bit different. partially because it doesn't say read the instructions on the wheel like the old Centerlines did, but they're really good. It's a 15x8, and the tire that I've got on here for the street is a ProTrack N5015 bias ply. Cool old square profile 70s tires. And that's it for wheels and tires. Now all I have to do is pack, and we'll see you in the morning for a road trip to the drag strip. Good morning, it's time to head to Famoso Dragstrip, find out how quick this is. I'm gonna top it off with some 91 octane, most of which is gonna hit the ground because the California fill nozzles will not fit this thing. So on the way, I'm gonna tell you more about the car, and hopefully it makes it there in one piece. What a mess. Seriously, every single time. Let's talk more about specs on the Camaro. I told you it's a 500 horse, 400 cubic inch small block. I didn't tell you that it's got 2.5 inch Flowmasters on it now. And the drivetrain combo, I changed a couple things in order to make it be able to cruise the highway better. This used to have 456 gears in the back and a 5,000 stall converter, and you really didn't want to drive it on the freeway. Now, I've got a Yank converter in it. I think it's about 3,500 stall. The transmission is a GearStar, and it's a Turbo 350. I picked the Turbo 350 simply because it's lighter, and it has less rotational mass in it than a Turbo 400. So that was quick and easy. It is a full manual valve body and free wheels on D-cell. And then behind the GearStar Turbo 350, I've got a gear vendor's overdrive. So I just click a button and boom, it drops some RPM off of it. The gear vendors has a 0.78 to 1 ratio. So it's just a little bit of overdrive. And then in the back, I got a Ford 9-inch, and I changed away from the 456s and put a 350 gear in it, and it's got a true track. I'm almost at Highway 99 through Bakersfield and then to the track. While we're waiting, how about some fun facts? Why is a Camaro called a Camaro? Well, by 1966, Chevy had figured out that they needed a competitor to the Mustang that had come out in 64 and a half. And they started to build prototypes of it. Believe it or not, the original name of the Camaro was Panther. And I've seen people deny that, but if you look at photos of the prototypes that they built, there's a badge on the fender that says Panther. I think, and this is a wild guess, I think that they got wind of the fact that Mercury was coming out with the Cougar, and Cougar and Panther were too similar. It's my guess about why they ended up changing the name. The guy running Chevrolet at the time, his name was Pete Estes, and he called together all the journalists in like a broadcast meeting, and he called it CPAW, Society for the Elimination of Panthers from the Automotive World. And he said, it is not going to be named Panther. And so everybody had to wait. And eventually, they had the press conference and said, the name of the new car is Camaro. What does that even mean? At the time, there was big discussion that it was a word in French that meant pal. And they claimed that based on some French to English dictionary that they had at the time. Thing is, a while back I was able to find a copy of that French English dictionary. The word Camaro is not in it. There's stuff like camarade and other words like that in various languages that are similar, but no Camaro. And so basically, they just made it up. And everybody has spelled it wrong since. So whether it's Camaro with an E, which it's not, or Camaro with an A, the other thing that they said way back then is that Camaro meant a small, vicious animal that eats Mustangs. That actually came straight from Chevrolet. So now you know. I made it. Famoso Dragstrip. This place opened in 1952 to 1954, depending on who you trust. Like many drag strips of the day, it was an Army airfield, an auxiliary airfield back in World War II. And in the 50s, there was a club out of Bakersfield that was called the Smokers. And they took the thing over. They made drag racing happen here. The big deal was in 1959, they came up with the event called the U.S. Fuel and Gas Championship. And in 59, they paid Don Garlits to come from the East Coast to run against all the West Coast hotshots. And honestly, the West Coast guys destroyed Garlits, and that inspired him to put a supercharger on the car and go barnstorming and honestly become the greatest drag racer in all time. So that was 1959. After a while, they sold ownership. I guess the Smokers fell out of it, and they sold the ownership of that name, U.S. Fuel and Gas Championship, and it became the March Meet, which continues to this day. Huge names have won the March Meet. I mean, you go back into the day, there's no vintage Top Fuel driver that you can name that wasn't involved back here. And in the 80s, they even had people like John Force and Shirley Muldowney out here winning. So this is a very historic, cool place. Now I'm gonna slap some slicks on the back of the Crusher. Nothing else will change from street trim. Then we'll see how quick it is if I pass tech. I know what you're thinking. Why do I run such tiny slicks on this car? And I would agree, but I have reasons. First of all, because this only has a 350 axle gear, having a shorter tire gives me a little bit lower effective gear ratio for more RPM. The other thing is, these fit in the trunk and they fit over the roll bar to get them into the back seat. That's really the big reason. This is a Hoosier 27 by 1150/15 and it is a DOT, so that'd be a little bit different in a slick size. Dinky slick incoming. Okay. I got the slicks all on. Now I'm gonna drive up through the pits, go through tech inspection, and get in the staging lanes so that I can wait for my first pass. And it's my time. Okay, what I'm gonna do here is leave off the foot brake. This car has a trans brake, but that's really unusual for such a tame combo. So I'm gonna show you kind of what would happen with your typical combination and have less risk of spinning the tires. Also, you're gonna see me go from first to second and then click the overdrive rather than go into third. Because this has such a high rear gear, I would rather keep the RPM up by hitting the overdrive, which would be less of an RPM drop than going into third. All right, it's my turn in the burnout box. Just a little bit, but I think I'm good. Thank you. All right, here's the polygraph test in my hand. I'm comparing my best run ever with this configuration into what happened today. So my best run ever was at Las Vegas, and it went 11:75.9 at 116.49. And just now, I went 11:58.8 at 117.57. It's interesting to look at the progressives. First of all, I cut an 025 light. Let's see, 60 foot. I only went 1.687. Last time it was 1.726, so obviously quicker, but not enough to add up to 2/10. I should be able to get an even lower 60 foot and ET. So the 8th mile was best before 754, now 742. Best mile an hour at the 8th, it was 93.15, now 94.14, so almost exactly a mile an hour. And finally, of course, 1175 to 1158 at 117. The car has run as fast as 119.8, but it's really hot outside. I think what I'm gonna do is put some air in the tires because I think they're just a little bit low, and then go back up, and I might even try the trans brake. All right, going again. I put 12 pounds in the tires, so that's solid. And we're gonna see what happens here. You know, I was thinking about using the trans brake this time, but I think for scientific method testing, I'm gonna foot brake it again with the more air in the tires. I think that was better 60 foot, but I did roll in the beams just a bit. Thanks a lot. Little bit better, 1153 at 118. Another O light. I cut a 069 light that time. It was 025 the first time. You know, it's funny. When I do the stuff for my TV shows and I post pictures of time slips, people always go, "Oh, terrible reaction time, you don't know what you're doing." You know what the deal is that the tree goes and I look over at my director and he's like, "Yes, we're ready to go," and then I go. So when I'm actually trying, I can get some O lights in a slow car anyway. 1153 at 118. Still not awesome 60 foot, 169. Part of that's the gear, I guess. The 8th mile time that time, 738 with a 7 at 94.9 and an 1153. That's what I was hoping to get done today. I knew there was an 1150 in the car based on my numbers that I saw both at Las Vegas and Pomona. So there you go, 1153 winning. 1153, that's exactly where I thought this car should be coming in here, but I keep complaining that the 60 foot time isn't what it should be. And if you look at the video frame by frame, you can see what's happening. The back of the car is squatting and then recovering, and when it recovers, it's spinning the tires just a hair. What you would rather have it do, obviously, is have no wasted motion and just leave. Fortunately, I have QA1 double adjustable shocks in the back. So what I'm gonna do is crawl under and put, I don't know, 5 more clicks in the compression and see if that does anything. Then I'll go back up and leave off the foot brake once again. I'd like to watch the video and see if it actually fixed that squat or not. Thanks for standing here all day.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, same exact 60 foot time, 1155 at 118, an 045 light, thank you, 3 O's in a row. Better 8th mile that time, 740 at 94.63 miles an hour. Bottom line is I think we've reached the limits of what this car is right now in this weather. You know what? Any day you can drive your car home is a win. The question is, will it make it all the way home? If you look at my third pass in slow-mo, you can see I got the rear shock stiffened up on this thing. The rear of the car is still squatting, but look at the distance between the top of the tire and the bottom of the wheel arch. It's not really changing. That means it's not the suspension that's squatting. It looks like the tires don't have enough air in them, and they're actually collapsing. If you listen carefully, you can see that the car rolls about a foot, then the tire unwinds and breaks loose, and you can hear it spin, then it hooks back up. And when all that is happening, the nose of the car is porpoising. So this still needs some help, but we're not going to get that done today. So that's a good day. An 025 light with an 1158. Then an 068 light with an 1153, and then an 045 light with an 1155. I should have entered the bracket race. Crusher Camaro is nowhere near as fast as it used to be, but that's not the point of this particular configuration. It's a total daily driver, and I am gonna drive at 75 miles an hour all the way home. I hope. All right, if you dug this video, do me a favor and watch the one on my channel that's all about 30 years of this car. All kinds of different configurations since 1994. It's worth checking out. Also, the biggest thing you can do for me is go watch another video right now so we can drive up those watch hours. And finally, you know where the link is in the profile so that you can get my gear. This isn't my gear though. This is Tony Angelo gear. Support him too. He's Stay Tuned on YouTube. That's a wrap. I'm out of here.